So I went and got a COVID test yesterday, so I can go to the hockey game tomorrow. And full disclosure, right at the outset, before I start telling the story, I know that participating in any of this nonsense makes me a hypocrite. I realize it flies in the face of the zero compliance policy I am always espousing, but I have a twofold excuse. One, hockey games are the special fun activity that I do with my youngest daughter, and I would rather do this one silly thing than give that up. And two, I paid for my season tickets before they announced the policy, which I suspect was probably not a coincidence. But in any event, there you have it. There is my mea culpa. And you, the viewers, can decide on an individual basis whether you're willing to tolerate my monstrous, duplicitous behavior. So I go down to the free testing site at the local university. There was hardly anybody there when I showed up, but they've got like an entire half of a parking lot devoted to this thing. And there must be times during the week when they deal with high volume, because they've got this big, freakishly long rope line that's marked off like an amusement park line, where I wind up walking a quarter mile in order to traverse the 20 yards between my car and the place where I need to go. But by the time I get to the front of the line, there is no line. I'm the only one in it. They've got 4 tents where they're doing the testing. They've got a total of about 20 personnel there to assist the 4 or 5 people who were present when I arrived. So I'm standing there minding my own business, waiting for somebody to call me over, filling out my intake form on my little phone, and this kid walks over, who obviously is the person who assists the people at the head of the line with submitting their forms and then tells them which tent to go to and so on. He's in his early to mid-20s. He's 25 at the most, and he has that sort of douchey, slightly effeminate manner that seems to be so regrettably common in young men of that generation. He's got a job where he works outdoors. He has no direct physical interactions with anyone, but nonetheless, this kid is dressed like he is on the cleanup crew that had to go deal with the radioactive waste when the reactor melted down at Chernobyl. He's got a surgical gown on. He's got shoe covers. He's got rubber gloves. And he's got a mask. And he's got another mask on top of that mask. And then he's got a goddamn plastic face shield over the 2 masks. Again, to reiterate, we are outdoors on a warm, fairly breezy day. This kid is under 25. Healthy as a horse by all outward appearances. He's undoubtedly as fully vaxxed can be. I'm the only person within at least 100 feet. I myself have a stupid mask on because you can't enter the vicinity without one, or else campus security comes and tasers and pepper sprays and hog ties you, and then they bury you in a shallow grave out behind the tennis courts. And yes, this is another area where I have willfully violated my own personal strictures, because ordinarily, as a matter of policy, I recuse myself from all locations and all activities that require the wearing of the silly obedience muzzle, which at this point is as much a talisman of the wokesterist religion as the yarmulke is for practitioners of the Judaic faith. So add that to my mea culpa, and let's move on. This kid stops very abruptly when he gets to within social distancing distance, which I guess is the normative thing to do now. He asks me if I need any help submitting my form, which I don't. And then I ask him how things are going in the welding business. And look, I didn't really mean to do it. It just kind of came out on its own. It's sort of a reflex action that I've developed out of my deep and abiding desire to never start acting like any of this shit is normal or desirable or even tolerable. And so whenever I see a guy with a bandana on his face, I say, hey, how's the train robbing business? Because I still trenchantly insist on being a normal human being. So when I see a dude with a bandana over his nose and mouth, my instinctive mental reaction is, somebody about to get robbed. Hope it ain't me. And similarly, on those rare occasions when I see some dipshit who's such a true believer in the cult of performative obedience that they've got a goddamn plastic face shield over their 2 masks, I freely admit it. I am congenitally incapable of not mocking that person in some way. So in that particular case, since the person has decided of their own free will to walk around in public looking like a welder's apprentice, when I see the plastic face shield, I say, hey, how's the welding business? Yeah, it took him a good 4 or 5 seconds to get the joke. And let me tell you, he was not amused when he did, not one little bit. He takes 2 steps backward just to emphasize how toxic and loathsome he thinks I am for being a person who even needs to get a COVID test. And he says, pitching his voice an octave below where it was a moment ago, "Sir, I'm gonna need you to pull your mask up over your nose." That was what he decided to go with. A kid with a face shield over his 2 face masks, who's fully vaccinated, who's standing 8 to 10 feet away from me, was scared of my exposed nasal passages. And I'm thinking, what must it be like to live such a fearful, joyless life? And why am I thinking that about someone who is half my age when I should be thinking it about people who are twice my age? The youngsters are the grumpy, humorless old people now. And when and how did that happen? Because I never got the memo, and neither did Jim Eagle, because I read all his mail so I would know if he did. Don't look at me all surprised. From high atop the battlements of Castle Curmudgeon, where the powder is dry, the beer is wet, and the ladies are lukewarm, good evening, Mr. and Mrs. America, and all ships at sea. Welcome to the program. I am your eponymous host and humble servant, and it was all the way back in episode number 009 that I sang the first verse of the Ballad of Kyle Rittenhouse. I will link to it in the end screen for those of you who haven't seen it. And today, 15 months later, after 8 days of one of the most shameful, most revolting, most repugnant political show trials in the history of American jurisprudence, I am back with the second verse. And I can also report that I continue to stand by every single judgment I made in the previous video, and especially the one where I said that when world wars break out from time to time and America sends its sons overseas to liberate other people in other countries from tyranny and oppression, kids like Kyle Rittenhouse are who we send, and they are why we always win. If Kyle Rittenhouse had been born 80 years sooner, I suspect he would have either come home with a chest full of medals or not come home at all. And you know, when a country is making the transition from functioning liberal democracy to third world tin pot banana republic, which our country is doing at the moment, there are certain things to which the populace needs to accustom itself. Runaway inflation, worthless currency, empty shelves, non-existent supply chains, and political show trials. You want to know why this Kyle Rittenhouse trial is producing so many holy shit moments where we're seeing things that just aren't normally seen in criminal trials in this country? It's because we're not a country where political show trials are a traditional part of our justice system. And this is a political show trial. There is no evidence, not one little tiny inkling of an iota, that Kyle Rittenhouse committed any crime whatsoever. So why are we having a murder trial? And why are the woke identitarian left and the mainstream fake news media, though I repeat myself, so maniacally invested in making this into a racial incident and Kyle Rittenhouse into a white supremacist? Because when you look at the basic facts of the case, it is extremely difficult to identify any sort of racial component, since the accused is named Rittenhouse and the alleged victims are named Rosenbaum, Grosskreutz, and Huber. For Christ's sake, I haven't seen this many German names since Hogan's Heroes went off the air. But having said that, Wisconsin, I think you've done an outstanding job playing up to the stereotype, so well done. So a German kid shoots some other German kids, and yet we've got these angry race hustlers on CNN and MSNBC and so forth who want you to believe Kyle Rittenhouse, the gainfully employed teenager who volunteers in his community, has no criminal record, is some sort of white supremacist vigilante spree killer, while the convicted child rapist he shot is some random innocent protester. And that's no hyperbole, by the way. Rosenbaum was an honest-to-God pederast child rapist. And if I'm being honest, I have a hard time being opposed to any series of events that culminates with a guy like that no longer being alive. In fact, All three of the scumbags who were shot in self-defense by Kyle Rittenhouse had been previously convicted of violent criminality. Moreover, there is video and or audio, multiple sources for all of the relevant events in this case. Video of Kyle Rittenhouse running for his life, trying to reach the police lines. Video of him being bashed in the head with a skateboard. Video of him rendering first aid to injured rioters earlier in the day. And video of him helping to scrub graffiti off the side of a building. And yeah, doesn't that sound like a real criminal mastermind? It sounds like a real unhinged spree shooter. Sounds like a real menace to society. Don't it? So how is it that this case, despite all the relevant parties being stubbornly white and having stubbornly German names, how has it been successfully racialized by the woke left and the fake news media? Well, you're forgetting the rules, frankly, even though we just went over this like 2 videos ago, because for all practical, rhetorical, and political purposes, Mr. Huber, Mr. Grosskreutz, and Mr. Rosenbaum, the gay pedophile rapist, they are all actually black. Why are they black? Because Jacob Blake is black. Jacob Blake, who also happens to be a rapist, by the way. Small world, isn't it? And Jacob Blake was shot by a white cop. Therefore, once there was the official fake news narrative, and once it carried the seal of approval from the big tech oligarchs, when the city of Kenosha was subsequently looted and burned in the name of something called racial justice, the violent criminals who were participating in the violent criminality became, for rhetorical purposes, peaceful protesters. And they also became black. Because even if you are a pederast child rapist named Rosenbaum, if you are part of an establishment-approved, media-approved orgy of looting and arson, if you meet the end of your life staring down the barrel of an AR-15 being wielded by a white male American, then you are not only automatically an innocent victim, but you are also honorarily black now. And LeBron James will even pretend he cares about you. And isn't that so awesome? But let's bring this thing back down to brass tacks. There is no Kyle Rittenhouse murder trial, and there is no Kenosha riot, where the woke mayor and the woke police chief and the woke fire chief all stand around roasting marshmallows on the smoldering ruin of the city they are sworn to serve and protect. If this country had a functioning news media, instead of a sausage factory where all the sausage is made of fake bullshit racism. And let's not forget the facts of the Jacob Blake case, where the Democrat Party actually dispatched its vice presidential nominee within 24 hours to go have coffee and hugs with this guy's family, and to stand in their driveway and blubber about what amazing people they are and what a horrible injustice has been done to them. Jacob Blake is a convicted violent felon. He had a restraining order against him because he stood accused of raping his children's mother and stealing her car and her debit card, but somehow, bizarrely, he still had child custody rights, so on the morning of his shooting, he drives over to the house of the same woman who had the restraining order on him, and he tries to rape her again while the kids are waiting in the car. And I'm not sure exactly how that conversation goes. Daddy, are we there yet? Hold on, son, I just need to stop by and rape your mother really fast and probably take whatever money she has. So I'll be back in like 5 minutes. So have a fruit roll up and play your video game. I will be back before you know it. And then we'll go to McDonald's and you can have a Happy Meal and play in the ball pit. Daddy just needs to do a little bit of raping first. You'll understand one day, son. So, not surprisingly, when the accused rapist with the restraining order decides to show up again with more raping on his mind, the victim quite reasonably calls 911 and said, yeah, my rapist is here trying to rape me again, so could you guys send a squad car over, you think? So Kenosha PD duly dispatches a squad car to the scene of the attempted rape and the restraining order violation, and when the officers arrive, Mr. Blake has decided he is no longer in a raping mood. And he's attempting to exit the premises, probably to go to McDonald's for the previously scheduled Happy Meals and ball pit revelry. The officers advise him that, yeah, dude, you're actually kind of totally going to jail. Because you can't really show up and try to rape someone who's got a restraining order on you for raping them previously, since that's multiple fairly serious felonies. So we're going to need you to turn around and put your hands on your head. But Jacob Blake says, no, damn you. I promised my little boy that he was going to get a Happy Meal and a ball pit, and I shan't allow you filthy white devils to disappoint him just over a little bit of rape. Have you no decency, sir? So he becomes belligerent and uncooperative, and the two officers, following their training and department protocol, they both tase his ass, but he just shakes it off. Continues on about his merry way down the front steps and out to the car where he intends to grab the knife that he has secreted underneath the driver's seat because, who knows, maybe these idiot cops will be more reasonable if I calmly explain myself while wildly brandishing a large bladed weapon. Frankly, the cops would have been perfectly justified in shooting this guy a lot earlier than they did. Mr. Blake should consider himself lucky. Hell, he should be overjoyed that he survived and wound up only being a paraplegic, because at least now I would surmise that his career as a rapist is effectively over and he never has to worry about that temptation or anything. So if there's a real winner here, maybe it's the women of Kenosha, and I guess also the male children of Kenosha, since Mr. Rosenbaum is no longer on the prowl. There was no racial injustice at all in what happened to Jacob Blake. If anything, it was an object lesson in good police procedure. There were no fatalities and no injuries to anyone except the scumbag rapist. In any other year but 2020, nobody outside Wisconsin ever hears about that story. But this was the summer of George Floyd. The fake news media, they wanted more race riots. They are desperate for more race riots because they think race riots are good for business. Even though they persist in referring to them as mostly peaceful protests, even as the bullets fly and entire cities burn. So it was the summer of 2020. And if there was any incident where a black suspect was shot by a white peace officer, the fake news media were going to make sure that city, doesn't matter what city it was or what state it's in, that city is going to burn to the ground. Because cities burning to the ground is good for business. Did you know our ratings go up 17% on average when cities burn, and they go up a further 6% when we try to frame some poor kid as a white supremacist? I have never met Kyle Rittenhouse, but my judgment of him remains the same as it did back when I made the first video in last September, I guess it was. If anything, seeing how he comported himself on the witness stand just reinforced what I thought of him already, that he's a good-hearted kid, that his intentions that night were totally altruistic, that he's too naive and too trusting for his own good and thus got himself into a situation he shouldn't have been in. But there was nothing he did on the night in question that amounts to a criminal offense, much less to murder. Seeing people on cable news shows, people who are styled as professional legal analysts, who sit there reading prepared text off a teleprompter, saying the most legally incoherent things you could think of, like, well, he crossed state lines and he had a big scary AR-15, so obviously he's a crazed white supremacist genocidal maniac. And my fancy degree from Harvard Law says so. It's just so sad. Watching people mailing it in, just reciting the script, saying what they're supposed to say so they can keep getting that precious TV FaceTime, collecting that delicious paycheck. In every other video you've watched about the Rittenhouse trial, there's probably been a strong focus, a singular focus even, on the emotional breakdown that he had on the stand yesterday. And I have made a conscious decision not to focus on that because while it may be the most viscerally compelling angle, it is not relevant to the facts of the case. And moreover, I feel like, I don't want to say it's voyeuristic, but I can't think of a better word to focus on that aspect of it. And to the people in Hollywood and the fake news media who are all too eager to pile on this kid and say just the most evil, hateful, vicious things about him, to proclaim that his panic attack on the stand was just a bit of acting, those people ought to be ashamed of themselves, but since they are soulless sociopaths who lack even the capacity to comprehend basic human decency, they will not be. Kyle Rittenhouse felt the need, and maybe it was a misguided need, but that doesn't matter, to step up and be a man and do the things that men are supposed to do in their community, like maintain civil society and law and order to protect the rights of the innocent, and maybe see to it that the entire town isn't put to the torch by marauding bands of outlaws. In the last 120 years or so, this is the sort of work that's normally been done by the established authorities and institutions in the local area. City Hall, the police, the fire department. But in Kenosha, the woke mayor and the woke police department and the woke fire department decided, hell, this is an establishment-approved, media-approved riot. We can't interfere with this, or else Twitter and CNN might get mad and call us names. So kids like Kyle Rittenhouse stepped in to fill the vacuum because they felt like they had to. There was nobody else to defend the innocent and protect private property, because the people whose job it is to do that, who get paid good money by the citizenry to do that, well, they chose instead to just sit on their fat asses and watch their city be looted and burned. The men wouldn't step up and be men, and the press wouldn't step up and do journalism. So now we have a murder trial, which still might end up with a conviction because the jurors don't want to cause a riot and then possibly be murdered. But like I said, this is all part of the process when you're learning to live in the third world. Thank you for watching. Regular schedule next week, so I will see you Monday. 3 videos next week for your viewing enjoyment. Have a pleasant tomorrow and a delightful, edifying weekend. Until next time, get off my lawn.